Hello and welcome to the latest webinar from Metis Partners, and today we'll be talking about IP assets in insolvency as usual, and we'll be focusing on data. So the last session was of course on valuation of IP insolvency, so if you missed that one then let us know and we'll be able to send you a link. Please do ask questions. There is a questions box in the application that we're using for the webinar, so please chip in with any questions you might have along the way and we'll answer those at the end. So today we are delighted to be joined by Rob Bilby, who's CEO of Marketing Innovation Group.
Hello.
And Morgan, who'll be taking us through the meat of the presentation.
Hello.
So just a little bit about who we are again. We are market leaders specialising in valuing and selling intellectual property, and we have a niche dealing with intellectual property in financial distress and corporate insolvency scenarios. We're based in Glasgow, but we work all over the UK for UK insolvency practitioners and Europe, and actually some worldwide experience as well. So we are, as I say, intellectual property specialists. We're not lawyers and we're not accountants. We usually end up helping out those professionals from the intellectual property aspect. So what are we going to talk about on this webinar? We're going to talk about the value of data in insolvency. Just anecdotally, I've been around the country over the last few weeks and I'm speaking to various people, and there is a real feeling that data is just too difficult to deal with and is a real bugbear of people, and you know, there is value in data. It just needs to be dealt with sensitively and in the right way, so that's what we're going to talk about today. So we're also going to talk about potential pitfalls and difficulties in dealing with data in insolvency, and we're going to alert you to the new data protection laws that will be enforced from May 2018. So I'll hand over to Morgan now to go through a few of the basics.
So when we talk about data, what are we actually talking about? Often the data is bandied about as a catch-all term that can mean almost anything at all. But today we're going to mainly focus on consumer data, so email addresses, names, addresses, phone numbers, any date of birth that's been attached to that, as well as transactional data such as payment details and billing history. And there's also data analytics. This includes how many times you shop, what you buy, and the price point that you buy at. So in an example, this is probably easiest to see. So for example, Sainsbury's. Consumer data that Sainsbury's is likely to have on you, for instance, includes your email address, your physical address, your phone number, your name, your date of birth, how many people live in your household, all the information that you fill in when you initially log into Sainsbury's. Then there's also the transactional or big data that they're going to have on you, such as when you do your online shopping. Depends on how you use their website. They're also likely to hold further data analytics on you. For example, they're likely to know exactly what type of milk you buy, how often you buy it, and in what quantity you buy it. You buy bread once a week, you buy too much pizza, you buy a bit too much ice cream as well. But what kind of data and databases is it stored in? So the types of databases can vary greatly, from contacts and Outlook, which are not necessarily a database in and of itself, but still data that could be used, to an Excel spreadsheet, to an outsourced CRM system that manages the data. And when you first encounter a database as an insolvency professional, the type of the database can both indicate the type of sale or license that may be possible in insolvency, as well as potentially giving you an indication as to the quality of the data, giving in turn an initial indication of value. So onto the data itself. It's important to know that the data is correct, and you can match that to external data points such as postcodes, so the quality of the data can be adequately assessed. In addition, in insolvency, one of the important factors to consider is the quantity of data, as even if the data has been appropriately cleansed and it's up to date and it's all singing and all dancing, if there's only a small amount, it may not make commercial sense to sell or license this on. Now clearly, in every insolvency, some data is going to be more valuable than others, and the commercial context in which the data sits is vital in be able to fully monetize the data. For example, at the moment, data regulations suggest that data should only be currently sold in the same sector in which it was gathered. Now, how do you know which sectors are the most valuable or the most difficult? The most valuable sectors, in our experience, are those involved with gambling and betting data. And the most difficult data, or data sets rather, is for children and minors data. Perhaps that's been gathered for education or particularly for healthcare. The data can clearly vary greatly in quality and in quantity. An initial look by competent professionals can gather significant information in order to appropriately judge the best way forward.
Thanks, Morven. Now I'm delighted to have with me and Morven Rob Bilby from Marketing Innovation Group. He's the founder and CEO of Marketing Innovation Group and has been involved in a number of high-profile insolvencies over the last few years, and we at Metis have worked with him on several assignments, and he's been very helpful in helping us to understand data and what needs to be done with it better, especially the intricacies. As Rob's going to talk about, there are a lot of intricacies involved in dealing with data, and especially data in insolvency. He's also dealt with lots of businesses, large and small, with in insolvency as well, going concern businesses, helping them with their data-driven marketing plans and many other aspects of their data. So Rob, I should point out, is not just a technical person. He's held executive board level roles in the jewelry and watch, fashion, babywear and gambling industries, so he's got a wealth of experience in this area. So without further ado, Rob, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Dan. So yeah, Marketing Innovation Group is a data-driven marketing agency, and these are a few of the clients that we've worked with over the years. We were thrust into the world of insolvency administrations when some of our clients in 2008 went into administration, namely Woolworths, MFI, The Pier and Silo, for example. And at that point we were responsible for marketing on behalf of the administrators, as well as helping them realise the assets of the data and try and generate more business for those businesses that were in administration themselves. So let's first of all look at data compliance, or data and compliance. The current regulations are the Data Protection Act in 1998, and so our focus is more related to marketing, so we've been more concerned with customers and prospects, suppliers, although some businesses and some of you will be concerned about other data sets in the organisation, such as employees past and present. So it's all currently legislated for by the Data Protection Act of 1998. At that time, of course, email didn't really exist, and so the Privacy and Electronic Communication Regulations 2003, PECA to its friends, was introduced to try and control and identify compliance around the use of email. So first of all, let's talk a little bit more then about the General Data Protection Regulation. The General Data Protection Regulation is due to come into force, as Morgan said, on 25th of May 2018, and it's a significant update on the previous rules. There's an awful lot of components and elements, much of which is still being ironed out, and some of the legislation hasn't yet been written, and a number of elements, for example, the opt-in elements are currently under discussion and review as we speak. So the key impacts, the things that I think you will be surprised to hear about and perhaps will impact upon you more than anything else, as data controllers of businesses that are in administration, are a few of the headlines in the following. So first of all, at the moment, if somebody was to contact you and ask for the information that you know about them, i.e. subject to access requests, you can charge them £10 and you can take up to 40 days to deliver it, usually by post. In the future, that's going to be free, and I think that's going to open the floodgates, and businesses and organisations need to be prepared for an influx of people just wanting to know what it is that you know about them. Also, it's going to be done in a shorter period of time, 30 days, and ideally in a digital format, in a common digital format that everyone can read. So that, I think, is going to be a significant impact. The second is that the opt-in, i.e. the thing that allows you to use SMS or email and communicate from a marketing perspective, that can't be a pre-tick box, an approval or anything that's hidden in T's and C's. It has to be what they describe as an explicit approval to market to them. Furthermore, they're being specific about children, so if any business is marketing to children, i.e. individuals that are under 16, you actually will need the approval or the opt-in of the parent or the guardian. And I would imagine that there's very few businesses that actually take the time to do that. And finally, and I think probably the biggest impact for me, is in B2B marketing. So those organisations that are selling to other organisations, they will need to differentiate between the businesses that are incorporated and those that are not, i.e. partnerships and the sole traders, because that data, for the latter group, will be regarded as personal data, and that will require an opt-in to market to them as well. And very few organisations have considered that. The legislation still isn't out on that, but certainly that's the guideline, and that's what they're aiming to cover for the future. So, moving on and looking at the some of the other elements of the GDPR regulations. First of all, during the last few months, as a result of the ICO working through these things and saying what is relevant, what isn't, what will be legislated for and what won't be, the ICO has been tightening up and becoming, in my view, far more aggressive. And in reality, when I contact the ICO and ask them questions now, it's either a straight no or no reply. No, they decline to answer because they don't want to commit themselves still. So we are generally finding that they're much more harsh in their approach. One of the requirements that will take place for some of the businesses, and I accept that it's the larger organisations such as public authorities or high-risk businesses, is that they will also need to nominate a data protection officer who, with the directors, will be responsible for monitoring and compliance of data with regard to the new rules. Fines are going to increase from 500,000 to 20 million euros, or 4% of global revenue, whichever is the higher. And also firms who are involved, or organisations that are involved in processing the data, not just the data controller, the organisations that you use to manage the data, they're going to fall within the remit of the GDPR regs as well. So you will need to be aware of where your data is and who's using it and what for and what purposes, and effectively carry out some kind of audit around what they do. Processes also have to be established to deal with failure. So a little bit like total quality of 15, 20 years ago, where you will need to put in some, in case anything happens or there's a breach, you put in some procedures so that you know exactly what's happening. You need to evidence that. What they call the data protection impact assessments. So effectively that's you looking forward to see what might happen, and if it does happen, what you'll do about it. And then finally, data breaches will need to be reported legally. In some cases, for high-risk businesses, we're not quite sure exactly what does and doesn't have to be reported at the moment. And as you've probably seen in the news, recent things with regard to Yahoo and Tesco have actually been reported a number of years after the event. And those are the kind of things that will need to be sorted for the future. So in your shoes, I just wanted to put together a quick checklist to look at the things that I would look at if I was in the circumstances of managing and being responsible for a business as data controller, to find out exactly what you do and don't need to do with regard to data. So first of all, what data is held and where? So who has access to it, including third parties? I've already mentioned those might include data services companies, email providers, fulfillment companies, and so on. Is the business even registered to hold data? Quite often when I work on a project, I'll just look on the data protection register, which is online, to check to see whether or not the business is actually even registered to hold data, and often it's not, or that registration has fallen away as it's not been renewed. So next is who's responsible for the security and the management of that data. So where in the business does the data sit? Who's responsible for collecting it, making sure that the permissions are correct to use it, and so on? What processes are in place to capture and manage that data and secure it? And is there a disaster recovery plan, as I mentioned, for the data protection impact assessment in place? You know, what procedures exist for a breach? And what is the assessment of the impact of the various types of breach? So the key piece for me, obviously, in marketing is what marketing practices are currently underway, who's doing what, and is that compliant with the existing privacy policy? So looking at realising the data assets, which is the commercial end of this whole area, it probably isn't as bad as some people might believe, in that there are still ways and means to make money from the data asset that exists in the business, albeit that the Information Commissioner's Office has said that they don't regard it as unreasonable that another organisation will buy the data asset. They will just require certain things to take place. So I mentioned here, an old second-hand car is just scrap metal unless it's got an MOT and it's taxed. So there's a number of things that you can do to make the data asset quite clearly more valuable and add value to it. And for me, it's an expression of goodwill of the business. And if I give a little example of that, as I mentioned earlier, one of my clients in 2008 was Woolworths. And when that business went into administration, the administrator sold on the brand and what was then their database of about 600,000 records to a new purchaser, and I believe that the value of that sale was about £5 million. On the first day of that purchaser taking on the brand, they launched a new website which will have cost only a few £100 to establish, and they were able to, within the next couple of weeks, acquire a further 2 million records of people who registered to find out more about Woolworths and what was going to happen to it in the coming months. So in other words, more than double the value of the database that had been sold. Another example was when we worked for HMV, and what data exists, most people, as I mentioned, don't often know where that data is. So for HMV, the marketing department believed that they were marketing to around 2 million records, when in fact, in reality, when we went and searched all the different data sets that existed, there was over 11 million records, which were deduplicated against each other. So there were 11 million separate individual people that transacted with the business at some point. Now, we did quite a lot of work on that data, so over the next 6 months, we were able to not necessarily utilise all 11 million, but we were able to relaunch the business 6 months later, using 6 million records in that database rather than the 2 million that had previously been used. So 5 things just to add value to that data asset. I think it's worth flagging. So it's not just about data compliance, it's also about data hygiene. And with Metis Partners, we've been working on developing a service and a solution called Validator, which enables you to at least to run the data past things like the personal address file, deduplicate the records in there and so on. So you can actually create something that you recognise as clean, correct, and as tidy and as sorted as it could possibly be. The second thing we do is we carry out data audit, so we can actually describe what data exists and what that data components, what the field headers are effectively, and from that we can generate a prospectus about that data to help sell it. The third thing, of course, is we can also enhance that data. So if that data, for example, was consumer data, we might overlay on that dates of birth or profiling information to talk about the different types of customers that exist within the database. If it was a B2B database, typically we might also add in other contacts, or we might identify credit status of the component elements of the database. So in other words, trying to make as much or more of the data that exists. Clearly the business that failed probably wasn't doing that, so there's often quite a lot that we can add. And then we move on then to try and think about who else might be able to utilise that data. And that doesn't necessarily just mean the company that is in administration and the new owner of those assets. It could be other organisations. So, as I mentioned here, there could be multiple uses of that data, not necessarily after the administration, but during the administration. It's possible for that data to be used for other purposes compliantly. Obviously, care needs to be taken, and you need to consider what the rules and regulations are for using that for third parties. But in the circumstances that a data controller has got the use of that data, it can use it for a number of things that will provide a commercial solution. So hopefully that's given you a few things to think about. And I've hand back over now to Morgan.
Thanks, Rob. So in terms of the commercialisation, how can you commercialise this data in insolvency? I think one of the things that has come hopefully quite clearly across is that speaking to a data professional quickly can help you understand your responsibilities as fast as possible. Now, in order to sell or license the data, there's clearly these two options, but both present opportunities and risks, and these can be mitigated with the help of a data professional. Under these new regulations, it's important to speak to these data professionals as quickly as possible to understand as many options as you might have as well as your exposure to any subject access requests that Rob mentioned earlier, or indeed, in addition, any accruing liabilities that might exist during the administration or liquidation. When you're thinking about selling or licensing the data, it's also important to understand or know what type of sale or license you're proposing. For example, it's possible to license the data to multiple parties in multiple different sectors, depending on how that data has been cleansed, thereby adding multiple ongoing revenue streams throughout the administration, clearly maximising returns to creditors.
That's right, Morgan, and that's something obviously Rob touched on before in relation to Validator and the product we have been developing to really create the gold standard in relation to dealing with data in insolvency situations. So, as Rob said, that's not just about the compliance side, but also about the about creating value in the data that you have through looking at which markets you can sell the data to. So it's not straightforward. I think the one thing that's coming across here is data is not straightforward. It's probably one of the most complicated assets an insolvency practitioner will have to deal with. And yeah, definitely a good idea to speak to your lawyer or someone like us, someone like Rob, to maybe understand a bit more about your duties, and then going a bit further than that, how can you actually get some value back for it? But what we're pains to say in this webinar is, it's not something to be scared of. It's not something to shut away in a cupboard and not deal with, as many of you do. It's something to look at as an asset rather than a liability, or at least to think of the prospect of it being an asset rather than a liability. But thought we'd ask a couple of questions of you, Rob, at this stage about potential pitfalls for insolvency practitioners. What happens if they just do nothing? Because that's probably, as I said, something that's quite common.
We've actually come across that quite a bit, and people tend to ignore it and hope it'll go away. But in reality, the insolvency practitioner becomes the data controller and therefore is legally responsible for example, providing the subject access request information, but clearly the use of the data going forward. So from a marketing perspective, making sure that all the correct permissions are in place. Whilst the Information Commission's Office is saying at the moment that they will accept that historical permissions could be effectively carried forward, and it isn't necessary to re-permission all of the data with regard to GDPR next year, they are saying that that is so long as those permissions can be evidenced, and also as long as those permissions are compliant with the GDPR regulations next year. So there are some things to worry about. It is a criminal act, so you can't indemnify yourself from responsibility.
Okay, thanks, Rob. And are there any ongoing liabilities post-sale? So if an insolvency practitioner sells the data on to a third party who uses it, is that the end of the story, or are there ongoing liabilities?
So the insolvency practitioner is liable ongoing. I mean, the reality is you're a reseller of the data and you sold it on to a third party, so you do need to have permission to do that. And as I mentioned earlier, the ICO says that it's not reasonable to expect that the asset, the data asset, will be sold on to an acquirer of the assets in the business, as long as it's for the same purpose for which the data is captured. However, they do say that it's a necessity to enable the data subject to know that that transaction has taken place. In other words, communicate with everybody.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, is just to make sure you're on top of it and getting advice and communicating and, as I say, looking at it as an asset. So I'll pass you over to Morgan to give you the 5 key takeaways from today's session.
Thanks, Matt. So I think the first key takeaway for us, and hopefully for you guys, is know how much data you have, as well as the sector from which it's been gathered. It's really important to know this from the onset in order to be able to maximise returns from it, but also just to be aware of what type of liabilities you might be incurring. Secondly, gather as much practical information as possible. So, for instance, as Rob mentioned, who's got access to the data just now? Is the data on the cloud? If so, have the fees been paid? Does the company have the data in its physical possession? This is really important, as it will impact on how you can gain value. Indeed, where where the liabilities will need to be based. Thirdly, pinpoint the type of sale or license you're looking to use. If you're looking to use licenses, look for whether you're looking to see a non-exclusive or an exclusive license, and particularly if you're doing an exclusive license, check whether you can do an exclusive license per sector. This can be another way to do multiple licenses. Fourthly, be aware of the potential pitfalls of data controller. Obviously, it's important to be aware of the risks as being a data controller, but these shouldn't overshadow what could be the potential opportunity that data presents. And fifth, if in doubt, give us or another data professional a call in order that you can fully understand your options. So here is our IP asset checklist. If you don't have this, please do email us after this and we will send it on to you.
Okay, thanks very much, Morven. So that's brought us pretty much to the end of the webinar. Apologies for the sound quality. I think we had a couple of issues there that were coming over on the questions. I'll just ask Morven, have we had any questions from the audience?
We have, yes. We have a question. Are there any immediate steps that insolvency practitioners can take to maximise the value of the data in the first days following an appointment before asking for our help with our data?
So they don't want to use this at all. That's a good question we don't want to answer. But Rob, any ideas on that? What insolvency practitioners can do day one to try and maximise value?
Well, as I mentioned with regard to audits, one of the things I was trying to advise the people at the time to do was create a website that would enable them to capture more information. When a business goes into administration, particularly one that's publicly known, immediately people go on the web to try and find out more about what's going on. That's a great opportunity to capture more information. We did the same with audits, and we gathered another 32,000 additional potential customers and permission to use that data by simply making a web page available asking people to register. So that's one of the things that you can do. Certainly, there'll be a whole bunch of other things. Is that okay?
Yeah, no, I think, and that's actually, it's a great question, because actually one of the things about validator is that, as Rob says, in his experience, really dealing with this issue straight away on day one and communicating with all the data subjects is key. So as, and obviously you don't need to use us to validate if you want to just communicate with the data subjects and tell them you've got their data, and then actually what you should be really doing is looking to cleanse the data through those communications, and that's where we can help, Rob can help. So I think that's the end of this webinar. Thanks for all of you who attended. The next webinar is on domain names, and we've been becoming far more active in this space over the last 18 months, and that's on the 21st of April. We have our contact details there, so please do get in touch if you have any questions or need any help with data. So thanks for attending, and hopefully see you on the next webinar.